with each other over who gets to work with this insider. This really has changed the landscape. Most insider threats are just dumb mistakes, but there is about 15% that are malicious, and a larger percentage of them are attributable to dark web recruitment. Some of our clients are monitoring the dark web on their own with their own resources. We spoke with one pharmaceutical just about a month ago that goes into the dark web all the time, has staff doing this, knows where to go, and is looking for intellectual property of theirs being sold. They meet with the DEA about once a month, and they are finding things. There's also vendors that will help you with that. So this has changed the insider landscape. Please move the slide. Today we'll talk about 3 key issues. First, how do we define insider threats? And that's good to just level the definition set. Second, what are the components of technical controls? We heard from Donna that technology is just one piece of it. It's also people and policies. This presentation will focus on the technology, but the people and the process is obviously just as important, if not more important. And then third, we'll look at the market and what types of products are out there. Advance the slide, please. So what's the definition of insider threat? This is Gartner's attack chain, and we put, I'm sure you're all familiar with the kill chain. This is our version of it, where you have 6 different phases: delivery of an attack, then the exploit or the installation, calling back home, then you get into privileged operations, you access assets, and then you either change data or exfiltrate it. The outsiders are gaining access that they don't have. The insiders are using access they already have. So insider threats is over on the right. Now, outsiders become insiders when they infiltrate the organization, but the main focus of insider threat technology is getting the employees or the contractors or people that already have access to your system. So that's our definition. Now, not all insiders are the same. As I just mentioned a few minutes ago, in dealing with Gartner clients, about 85% of incidents that are detected are just this category, goofs. People abusing privileges, whether it's maliciously or not. It's usually not malicious. They're just making mistakes. I talked to a client 2 days ago that said, they saw this really anomalous access from the Ukraine. Well, it turns out someone was on vacation in Ukraine, which I don't understand why, it's a little dangerous, and they were using the company laptop to log in. So, they were putting their company in danger. I've also talked to other incidents that have come up is there was a big backup going on from some remote home PC, and backups are supposed to happen only from service accounts inside the organization. So this backup definitely looked suspicious, the whole, all these servers and files. Well, it turned out it was a system admin who didn't feel like coming into the office to execute the backup and had forgotten to schedule it properly, so was doing it at home at night from his home PC. Again, maybe not such a good idea from a security perspective. So most of the insider threats really are what we call goofs. There's also pawns. Pawns are the guys and girls that are manipulated. So we get spear phishing attacks and we click on them because we believe them to be legitimate. That's an example of a pawn. And most of the time, pawns don't know they're being manipulated. Then there's the collaborators, which we saw in the last slide. People that are intentionally collaborating with criminals for financial gain or revenge. And then there's the lone wolf. Now, the lone wolves can be people with low privileges, like bookkeepers, or they can be people like Snowden with very high privileges. So all of these different categories of insider threats are differentiated by their privileges. Do they have low, medium, or high? And even if they have low, they may get to high pretty quickly if they know their way around. So the green bubbles are the technical controls that we can apply to detect these inside threats, and the orange bubbles are the non-technical controls. So at the basics, you need monitoring. You need to monitor what people are doing. And most of the monitoring systems are not user-aware today, but they are quickly becoming user-aware. User-aware just means look at the user ID, sort by user ID. If you want to get more advanced and you get into analytics, it's UEBA analytics, you start profiling users. What's normal for them? What's normal for the applications? But start out at least with monitoring and monitor user accounts. Security awareness. When I started in security, I was pretty jaded about training people, but then I learned it really does make a difference. People are your first defense. They see things before computers do still. Maybe not in the future, but right now, the best defense is training people to be really security aware. I know when I'm in Israel, I walk into a hotel lobby, they're so paranoid. They're worried about the packages I'm carrying, who I am. They're hyper security aware. And it's really helped them keep the terrorists at bay. So security awareness is important. Workforce management is important. Your managers, team leads. You know, I don't like to sound like you should be suspicious of all your employees, but you should be looking for suspect signs. Technology will never catch a trusted insider doing normal things. If they're doing something abnormal, yeah, the technology, if it's used properly, will highlight it. But if you have a privileged user or just an accountant, a bookkeeper that you trust, not doing anything abnormal, you're never going to catch them with technology. So that's why you need to make sure your managers are at least keeping their eye out for suspicious events. One of the CERT studies I saw a couple years ago showed that about 85 to 90% of insider threats were detected by people, and not all these systems, these identity access management systems, the SIM systems, didn't catch these people. So people were at the front line. And then continuous insider screening. When you hire someone, the screening doesn't stop then. It's a little creepy to talk about this, but you really do need to continually screen your employees and your contractors because things change. Their situation may change, they may join some movement that's malicious, especially nowadays. I'm sure, I don't want to get into politics, but people are really getting unhinged, and you don't know how that behavior will translate into your workplace. So there's a series of technical controls and also a series of non-technical controls. The rest of the presentation will focus on the technology. We've got lots of research on the human aspects, so please, we can, happy to share that also. Sharing the slide. Let's look at the components of technical controls then. We're calling this new breed of systems that has come up in the last couple of years. It came out of big data analytics. The vendors started packaging the analytics for repeatable use cases, and there was a new market that was pretty much born a couple years ago. And we're calling it user and entity behavior analytics. And this market really is around technology, and the technology is becoming features in many other markets. And we'll get into that towards the end of the presentation. But what's new here in security, and this has been going on, by the way, in the fraud world, in the customer acquisition and marketing world, credit underwriting, these aren't new techniques, but they are new to security. So there's three components to behavior analytics. One is the data that you bring in, the second piece is the analytics, and then the third piece is the response, the action. Vendors that we're seeing in the solutions are really only worrying about the data and the analytics, automating response using systems like Watson and cognitive computing. That's coming, it's not here yet today. So the data that you can feed into these systems are structured data, and that's where people usually start: logs, directory data, proxy logs, HR information. unstructured information. There's a lot of use of that in the DHS agencies, looking at email, looking for keywords, chats. You know, I have to bring up politics again, but as you noticed, the FBI was able to go through all of Hillary's other emails that were found on Wiener's server really quickly because they use that kind of technology. They can just check out keywords and different combinations of keywords at lightning speed to sift through the email. But you could do that too, looking for certain words that indicate that an employee is disgruntled, chatting to people they shouldn't be chatting to, and physical data, trying to bring in badge access, time recording information, anything to do with where a person is physically, and marrying that up with the computer and the logical data. So that's the data side, and we'll drill into this more. The analytics side is you're going to baseline and profile these entities that you're watching, monitoring. So you're baselining the activity of a user. And all that means is you're keeping a history of everything the user does. And obviously the vendors and packages will do this for you. So they know that I log in from Rockville, Maryland between 8 and 4 p.m., actually between 8 and midnight now. And they know what kind of files I usually access, what I'm usually spending time on, and then it's summarized in a record that this is what Aviva usually does. I'm also put into a peer group. So there's people in my division that act the same way. We're all on email a certain amount of time, research server a certain amount of time, and so now I'm put in a peer group, and you could see if I'm deviating from my peer group. You also baseline other entities. So you want to baseline a device. This device is usually used for backup, and now all of a sudden it's being used to download 100,000 files to a USB drive. You can also baseline applications, network behavior. Of course, it's really hard to find the needle in the haystack, but if you have advanced analytics and you compare a transaction to that baseline, so you can see a very unusual network protocol and communication going on that's not ever existed between that PC and this host server. It tells you something strange. And if you can correlate that activity from the device with what the user is doing in other entities, so for example, you could see the PC communicating with a host server it's never communicated before. You could see the user accessing a server and downloading files that have never been downloaded by that user before. And you could see the application is spitting out too much data. Now you're correlating the information in the application, the user, the device, and the network. And when you put all those alerts together, unusual behavior, you have a very high confidence alert that something's suspicious. So it's much more useful to look at these activities together. What's the user doing? What's the PC doing? What's the network doing? What's the data doing? And by correlating, you get much more accurate detection. How you look at these entities through advanced analytics, we'll look at that further. There's some basic rules, or you can get into machine learning, and now we're seeing cognitive computing, quantum computing, and the analytics is advancing really, really quickly. Just like automated cars self-driving, that's what's happening in security. So let's look at the data side. Now I'll drill into the data, then into the analytics, and then we'll look at the vendors. So on the data side, I put the data that's feeding these systems into 3 categories: light, medium, and serious. What that means is if you're just starting out and you don't have all this data together, it's usually the easiest thing to do is go get your access logs, your directory data, maybe some web proxy data, and put that together and put the analytics on top of that. And that's usually hard enough to do. I was talking to a government agency the other day and they were saying, well, it'll be hard enough for us just to get all the access logs in one place. Some companies have already done that, but many enterprises and organizations haven't. But usually that is a lot. You can get a lot of results from light data. I've seen one company, I work with a telecom company, put all this data together and actually only could sample every 10 records because the volume was so high. But just by looking at every 10 records of Access Directory and web proxy data, they did find some employees communicating with Chinese servers that they've never communicated with before and had no reason to communicate with. So they were able to detect that just with that data. If you want to get more serious, you start looking at network data, usually NetFlow, but some of the vendors will bring packets in. They don't have the capability of drilling into the data or application layer when they're looking at packets. You know, it's very hard to analyze and parse packets, but they usually can do it, parse it in terms of looking for anomalous communications and anomalous access. Also, endpoint data is very interesting. I don't know how many of you work with, do you work with EDR systems, endpoint detection and response? So the data in the EDR systems is not really analyzed that well by the EDR interface. You need hunters to go in and check, really drill in and figure out what the threats are. They're not that well prioritized. You need really smart people going in and figuring it all out. And sometimes they don't have the time, sometimes they don't have the inclination. So some of our clients are taking that EDR data and feeding it into UBA, and by correlating the EDR reportings with all the other information, or even just looking at the EDR reportings on their own and applying the analytics to that data, they're able to highlight which events are really important to look at. So EDR data is one of the best sources for information on what's really going on with this person using the endpoint. You can also look at application data, file data. So in other words, start with the data that's important in your organization. If I was the IT manager, that's probably where I would start. Identify your important files that you really care about losing or being stolen, if your important data, and go find vendors that will monitor that access. What's unusual coming out of the database? It's not normal for 1,000 records of this ilk to leave at this time of day. You can also look at source code. Some of the vendors will do that. Who's checking in and out source code? There's some manipulations going on in source code. And then if you're really serious, and usually the federal government is in this category when it comes to insider threat, especially with new regulations that you're under, they'll put endpoint surveillance agents on the endpoint. Now the difference between these surveillance agents and the EDR systems is those surveillance agents are looking at the user activity. The endpoint, the EDR vendors are looking at processes, so it's really hard to roll up to a user level. These surveillance agents are built to look at the user. And they're also looking at all the keystrokes, anything that's significant. Some do this more precisely than others. It depends on the vendor. You can also look at content. This is something the federal government's been doing for a while, looking at emails and chats and looking for keywords and lexicons and trying to put together malicious intent. And then building, by the way, I was recently in Russia. I shouldn't say this, but I was talking about this. Like, you can look at the emails and the chats, and the guy says, "We don't do that in Russia." I said, "Oh, okay. No surveillance here. No, we're not allowed." So it's probably a plant in the government. But I can tell you more about that later. The Russians haven't taken down the voting systems yet, have they? So everything's still running. And then building data. You can bring in information on shift changes, time recording, badges, and correlate that with the logical access. So the vendors are doing this all for us. You don't have to do this yourself. There's systems that'll plug right into your SIM systems, whether it's ArcSight or Splunk. They'll plug right into endpoint like Carbon Black or Tanium, and they'll read this stuff directly. They'll just put a network tap on your ports and read the net flow or read the packets, and they're trying to make this as seamless as possible. We can go to the next slide. So that's the data. What about the analytics? Gartner defines analytics in these 4 buckets. We've got descriptive analytics, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive. And as you move from left to right, the analytics become more advanced. So over here on the left, descriptive tells you what's happening. So here's an example. There's malware on an endpoint communicating with the command and control server. And you could just do that with simple rules. Diagnostic, why did it happen? The employee clicked on an email attachment, followed by, we saw lateral movement of a process. And here you may need more advanced math, but it's still not a lot of machine learning. You get into predictive, and this is the state of the industry today. They're getting at the most, sorry about that, predictive. So what will happen? We see this process, what do we think is going to happen? File A on server XYZ will be stolen by Joe's hijacked accounts. So the vendors that are good at this will give you a dashboard. Here's your high-risk users. Here's the high-risk activity. It's coming at you in real time or near real time, in under a minute, and saying this is what we think is going to happen. Alert, alert, go look at it. And prescriptive, where the industry is not there yet, is telling you what you should do about it. It's automating the response. So we think you should reset the password on the hijacked account, move the file off the server, and implement some DLP and some rules. So the analytics go from kind of basic into more advanced and machine learning. It's really hard to get under the cover of some of the vendors and figure out how advanced they really are. What I've seen is there's a lot of, in the profiling, there is some machine learning to put the user in a peer group. And there are some averages and statistics to say this is what the user usually does. But when it comes to looking for anomalies, there's really not that much machine learning going on today. Some of the vendors have it, most of them don't. But in the end, it's the results that people care about the most. And what I'm told is that about 85% of bad incidents can be detected with descriptive analytics. It's the unknown that you need help with. So that moves us into the next slide. I'm sure if you know about Donald Rumsfeld, you may have heard that he started talking about the unknown unknown. Have any of you heard about that? So that, I've been using this for such a long time, and then now Donald Rumsfeld said this a long time ago. I had heard it from some vendor that does advanced analytics. I don't know who came up with it first, if it was the industry or Rumsfeld, it doesn't really matter. He made this famous. And so what he said, just to refresh our memories, there are known knowns, and these are things that we know we know. Then there are known unknowns. That is to say, there are things that we now know we don't know. But there are also unknown unknowns. There are things we don't know we don't know. So we don't even know what we don't know. And that's what keeps people up at night when I talk to CISOs. It's, I'm pretty good at catching the known. I got a lot of systems, most of them are working, but I don't know what I don't know, and that's like really worrying me. And that's where anomaly detection comes in. Machines are really good at putting all the data out there in graphs and clusters, and then all the anomalies that don't fit into the norm show up way off on the scattergram. And that's the unknown unknown. So a human being has to go look at all those dots on the scattergram that are way above the median and after the baseline of activity, and a human has to say if it's good or bad. Computers can't tell you if it's good or bad yet. And there's a big debate in the industry if they'll ever be able to know the difference between good or bad. Some people think they're really evil, they're going to destroy us, like Elon Musk. Other people think, no, they'll be nice computers to us when we grow up and they won't pull us off. But in the end, it still takes people looking at these anomalies. People are needed to say if it's good or bad. Once they say it's good or bad, it becomes a known unknown. So this used to be an unknown unknown. Now we know it's bad or we know it's good. So that's what a supervised model is. You don't see supervised models in inside threats because there's just not enough experience here, there's not enough data. But you do see a lot of playbooks and rules around inside threats. And again, that will touch 85% of the bad activity. And the vendors have these playbooks. So they've seen bad behavior, they know what to look for. You guys have seen it. Everybody gets together, writes out these playbooks. Examples are audit file tampering, unusual file copy operations, searching for advanced file permissions, relatively low email activity. That was an interesting insight to me. When an employee is about to go bad, their email volume goes down because they're not engaged with their colleagues and they don't care about work anymore. So, I don't know, I'm going to stop doing email for other reasons. It's just becoming too overwhelming, but that's an indicator of someone about to go bad, apparently. And poor performance ratings, obviously, you want to keep an eye on them. So you need a combination of these analytics for optimal results. We can go to the next slide. And then finally, the other piece of the technology puzzle is what we call insider intelligence. And I know that DoD's done some work around this, but basically, again, it sounds creepy, but you need to do this. You need to know who your high-risk employees are. You know, who are your high-risk contractors that have access to data and you shouldn't necessarily give them that access. So what you want to do is combine as much internal information on them with external information. And you could do this in a simple way or in a serious way. A simple way would do keyword searches for unusual things and implement DLP. You may look at social media activities that gives you a little bit of a clue. Medium is now you're bringing in the HR complaints. If there are complaints about this person, what about financial information? Someone just go bankrupt? Did they just get arrested? Are they active in the underground? If you can track them there, people are anonymous most of the time. But there are firms that will help you do this. And then serious, we're starting to see machine learning applied to bring all this data, bringing it together, internal and external, and looking for those predictors of bad behavior that you wouldn't necessarily see in an indicator of compromise. So indicator of compromises are, yeah, this is the way we expect the behavior to be. This is the signature. But that's what happened before. It may not predict what's going to happen in the future. And if you do take some good machine learning and apply it to all the data, the indicators of compromise, you may see predictors that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. And we have seen that to be effective. So that's on the technology components. Now let's move over to the vendors and how the market's evolving. So this is an overview of user and entity behavior analytics. So you've got the user in the middle, that's the focus, but you also got the host or the endpoints that you're looking at, the data, you know, whether it's in a database or a file, the network activity, and the application activity. And you're bringing in data from all types of internal sources and external sources. So we talked about a lot of these, you know, SIM tools, network monitoring, log management. And you're basically looking for trusted insider risk or compromised insider threat. Hackers or insiders that you already trust. And there's a lot of secondary use cases. And then you need to feed all the results of these systems to workflow and orchestration. And that's a very fast evolving field too, because you've got so many different controls in your organization. You've got to blend them. And you only want one management console with high priority alerts. And we've got a long way to get there, but that's what this piece is about. So we can move to the next slide. The way the vendors have been evolving is you see these platform vendors. And then you also see UEBA or user context, meaning we're looking at the user account also as a product feature in these different areas. So you see SIM vendors incorporating user context for behavior analytics, and IBM QRadar and also LogRhythm are two good examples of that. You see some of the vendors in the DCAP space, that's data-centric audit and protection, incorporating user behavior analysis into their analytics to have data being accessed to look for anomalies. Those are vendors like Secupie